It's Dr. McCoy-Wilson. The mysterious comma is what we're going to talk about today or demystify today. I would say, hands down, in my 20 or so years of teaching writing, the most misunderstood uh, punctuation mark is the comma. And we will find it is not just a little punctuation mark. It governs sentence structure and whether or not your sentences make sense, whether or not your writing is cohesive. Um, it's everything. It's a really big deal understanding how to use commas. And over the years, nobody knows. There's this great mystery around comma use, and teaching writing is a good way to kind of simplify a sometimes complex, very little punctuation mark that is so misunderstood. And so hopefully this will be helpful to you. And here we are, the mysterious comma. It's Dr. McCoy-Wilson, and I hope to clarify a whole bunch of mystery and misunderstandings and stuff surrounding commas. So let's get right into it. There are approximately 6 comma rules, and I say approximately because I have combined one of those or 2 of those into one. So first, commas in a compound sentence, commas in a complex sentence, commas in a series, commas in a list, commas with appositives, and here's that combination, commas in direct addresses and beginning phrases. Let's see what they look like. Commas in compound sentences. A compound sentence is similar to a compound word in that we are joining 2 sentences together, just like when we join 2 words together to make a compound word. But in this case, we're joining 2 sentences together using a conjunction and a comma. And this mnemonic device, fanboys, should help you remember what the conjunctions are if you forgot that from earlier in your education. So first we have for, and, then nor, but, or, yet, and so. So the mnemonic device, fanboys, helps you to remember all of them. Okay, commas in a compound sentence. That's the first one. Place a comma after the first clause and before the conjunction. So you are putting together 2 independent clauses to make one sentence. So Andrea wants to travel around the world. That clause could very well stand on its own as a solitary sentence. But if you want to put 2 related ideas together that are both complete sentences, you'll do it with a comma and a conjunction. Andrea wants to travel around the world, comma, but she is afraid to fly. Here's another example. I want to lose weight, comma, yet I make bad food choices every day. So here you have it, commas in a compound sentence. Commas in a complex sentence. It's a complex relationship, and that's my little pet analogy or allusion for said complex relationship. So a complex sentence combines an independent clause and a dependent clause only when the dependent clause is placed at the beginning of the sentence. And if that's a little confusing, let's see it in action. When the dependent clause comes at the beginning of the sentence, place a comma after it. Dependent clauses are signaled by words like because, although, when, if, after. So let's see the first example of it. Before Emilio goes to work, comma, he needs to stop at the supermarket. So that first clause is dependent upon the second clause, the independent clause. Before Emilio goes to work, in and of itself, can't stand alone. It becomes a fragment if we just place the period after work. But because we know better, we're going to join a dependent clause and an independent clause. Before Emilio goes to work, comma, he needs to stop at the supermarket, period. So often I have students say, how do I know that I'm using a dependent clause? So words like before, because, although, when, if, after. So you really have to read your sentences back to yourself. That's another kind of tool of revision and reading and writing. Here's an example of when we don't need a comma with the same sentence. When the independent clause comes at the beginning of the sentence, no comma is necessary, as evidenced by the word independent. Emilio needs to stop at the supermarket. That could be a sentence all by itself, but we want to add more information. Emilio needs to stop at the supermarket before he goes to work. So it's that same dependent clause is at the end of the sentence, but when it falls at the end of the sentence, we don't need a comma. Next, commas in a series. Commas are used to separate a series of descriptive adjectives. And here's my little series allusion. All right, here's an example. Place a comma after each adjective except the last one preceding the noun it describes. This is a common one, a common mistake. We're listing a series of adjectives that modify a noun. What a cold, comma, snowy, comma, miserable day it is. So cold, snowy, and miserable are all adjectives modifying or providing more information about or describing day, the noun. And that's how we use commas in a series. This shouldn't be confused with commas in a list, which is next. Commas are used to separate a list of words or phrases. So this is a list of things, usually nouns. Place a comma after each word or phrase in the list. It could be a single noun or it could be a phrase. Place a conjunction before the last word or phrase in the list and place a comma before the conjunction. So if that's confusing, let's see it in action. Cars, comma, buses, comma, trucks, comma, and motorcycles jammed the freeway. This is often called an Oxford comma. That comma right before the conjunction. There are some pretty old grammar rules that omit the Oxford comma, but at least over the last 30 years, the Oxford comma has been the most academically acceptable. So that comma right before the conjunction. Now we have commas with appositives. And so here's my little grammar joke on the left. So what's an appositive? An appositive is an interrupting phrase placed in a sentence to rename or provide more information about a word. You know what this is, but you just didn't know it was called an appositive. Let's look at it. So when using appositives or an appositive and a comma or commas, set off the appositive with commas. Here's the example. Manuel Rodriguez, comma, the night manager, comma, has asked that we use the lockers to store our belongings. So here the appositive is an interrupting phrase, and it also provides more information about the subject or the noun, Manuel Rodriguez. We find out that he's the night manager, but we placed it right in the middle of the sentence, so we're going to need those commas to set it off, which means before and after. Commas in direct addresses or beginning phrases. This first part of the combination rule is direct addresses. Place a comma after names or titles when the speaker is addressing the person in question. Let's look at that. Mom, I think we should go shopping together for Marjorie's gift. So that's one example. And then you set off names or titles when the speaker is addressing the person in question mid-sentence. So this is kind of like the appositive, only this is an address. Somebody is talking about or to someone, or describing an event in which someone's talking. The item we need to address, comma, Mr. Mayor, comma, is the city's education. So that's a little different, as we see, from the appositive rule. But these are two examples of direct addresses. Now, commas in beginning phrases. Place a comma after beginning phrases and transition words such as yes, first, next, finally, in conclusion, therefore, no, furthermore, etc. There are a whole bunch of them. This is just a short list. Here's an example of what that looks like. There are many more beginning phrases that I have not included here. But if you are starting a sentence with, yes, I do believe in the administrative fees, or no, I would not recommend that candidate, or first, or next, or finally, in conclusion, therefore, you use these phrases all the time. If you don't use them all the time, you really need to, because they are considered great transition words to transition a reader from one idea to the next and from one paragraph to the next. And that should be all, everybody. That kind of, I hope, clears up a whole bunch of the confusion around commas. Here's my information. Follow me on the socials, and happy writing.